thrilled to be here with you. I'm thrilled to have a chance to just fellowship with you. You know, 2 weeks ago in Cleveland, we had kind of a quiet evening. What an incredible array of talent was on that debate stage. How terrific is it that we have so many young, dynamic, charismatic, inspirational leaders stepping forward to lead the Republican Party and to lead this country. Yes. And what a contrast. Wow. You know, I'm pretty sure the first Democratic debate is going to consist of Hillary and the Chipotle clerk. Well, okay, actually, that's not fair. We can't forget about Bernie Sanders. So now the Democratic field consists of a wild-eyed socialist with ideas that are dangerous for America and the world.
Yep.
And Bernie Sanders. And it's amazing watching this. The Democrats, apparently, they keep delaying their debates. It's going to be September, then October, then November. I think they may just move it to 2017. Well, it's not widely known. But the Democrats had planned to have an earlier debate. The problem was the debate invitation was emailed to Hillary.
Get the FBI to deliver it.
along with the warrant.
I wish.
You know, each of us, we're here because our country's in crisis. We're here because we're bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Because our constitutional rights are under assault from Washington like never before. And because America has receded from leadership in the world. That has created a vacuum. And into that vacuum have stepped bad actors across the globe. You know, today, for the first time in history, a majority of Americans believe that our kids will have worse lives than we. 65%. That has never been the case in the history of this country. It may be the most un-American idea you can think of. I think the central issue in the 2016 election will be reigniting the promise of America. Getting back to that fundamental commitment, that ideal that our kids will have a better life than we did, and their kids will have a better life than they did. How do we do it? 3 simple common sense ideas. Number 1, we bring back jobs and growth and opportunity. The men and women gathered here, you understand cause and effect.
Oh, yeah.
Every time we pursue what we're doing now, out of control spending and taxes and regulation, the result is stagnation and misery and malaise. On the flip side, every time we have pursued tax reform and regulatory reform, whether in the 1920s under Calvin Coolidge, or the 1960s under JFK, or the 1980s under Reagan, every time the result has been incredible economic growth. My number 1 priority in office from the day I began serving was economic growth, because it's foundational to everything else. You want to address unemployment or the debt or the deficit. You want to rebuild our military to keep this nation safe. You want to restore and strengthen and preserve Social Security and Medicare. You've got to have growth. With growth, we can do all that. Without growth, we can't do anything. The 2 levers that historically had the greatest impact on growth are tax reform and reg reform. Growth doesn't come from government, but it sure can screw it up. Tax reform. You know, right now we spend about $500 billion a year on tax compliance. On lawyers, on accountants, on paperwork. That's about the budget of our entire military. Wasted every year on deadweight loss. As we say in Texas, it doesn't produce a single truck or tortilla. And I think the simplest and best tax reform is we should adopt a simple flat tax. Where every American can fill out his or her taxes on a postcard.
Yep.
And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS. There are about 90,000 employees at the IRS.
Wow.
We need to padlock that building. Take all 90,000 and put them down on our southern border.
Do you really want them in Texas?
Great point. Now, to be fair, I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But if you think about it, imagine, David, you traveled thousands of miles, the blazing hot sun. You're swimming across the Rio Grande. The first thing you see is 90,000 IRS agents. You turn around and go home And then the second key to growth is regulatory. We've seen an alphabet soup of federal regulators descending on small businesses and strangling jobs.
Yep.
You know, a few years back, I was visiting with some folks out in West Texas. And I asked them, I said, what's the difference between regulators and locusts? I said, well, the thing is, you can't use pesticide on the regulators. And this old West Texas farmer, he leaned back, he said, want to bet? Sad thing is, Karen, that's a true story. If you want economic growth, it is small businesses that are the key. 2/3 of all new jobs come from small businesses. And the most important regulatory reform is we need to repeal every word of Obamacare. We need to adopt common sense health care reform that makes health insurance personal and portable and affordable and keeps government from getting in between us and our doctors.
Yep.
The second key to reigniting the promise of America is we need to defend our constitutional rights. All of them. We need to defend the First Amendment, free speech, and especially religious liberty. Religious liberty has never been more under assault than it is right now today. And I'll point out, by the way, we've had some interesting moments. You know, a few months ago, there was a battle in the state of Indiana over defending religious liberty. And that battle was, as Ronald Reagan would say, a time for choosing. It was striking and sad just how many Republicans ran for the hills, including how many 2016 Republican presidential candidates somehow, when that fight was being waged, picked that exact moment to go rearrange their sock drawer. I can tell you this, when it comes to standing for religious liberty, for the right of every American to worship God and to live according to our faith and conscience free of government, I will never, ever, ever shy from standing and defending our rights.
Amen.
We need to defend the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
know, some of y'all may see, and I put out a video a few weeks
Oh,
ago.
yeah.
Baconator.
You know, sometimes Texans have a little bit different way of doing things.
Is that right?
So the video was machine gun bacon.
Yeah.
Where if you wrap bacon, it was actually a rifle, but it sounds better saying machine gun. You wrap bacon around the end and fire it, that thing heats up. Now, I'll tell you a funny thing, I actually overcooked the bacon. I went through 4 magazines, and by the end it was... IHOP is not going to start serving this anytime soon. It was not delicious, but it was fun to cook. And by the way, yesterday on Special Report, they showed the video yesterday on Fox News, and then Juan Williams said, well, you know, Cruz is going to lose Middle America with machine gun bacon. And I remember thinking, have you ever met anyone in the United States? Look, I'll take everyone who likes machine guns and bacon.
Yes.
You have everyone else. And I will note, when it comes to both the First and Second Amendment, one of the things that's been heartbreaking is the restriction of the constitutional rights of our servicemen and women.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of veterans who are here today. Let me say to everyone who is serving or has served, thank you for defending this nation. And I can promise you this, under a Cruz administration, no soldier or sailor or airman or Marine will be required to check his or her faith at the door or to seek your commanding officer's permission before worshiping God with all your heart and mind. And we should allow our servicemen and women to exercise their right to keep and bear arms and to defend them. The next time a jihadist shows up at a recruiting center in Chattanooga, he should meet the business end of a firearm being manned by a dozen Marines.
Hoorah.
We need to defend, or sailors, or soldiers. I'm not picking favorites, it just happened to be Marines there. I'm not going to get in the middle of that.
Smart man.
We need to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments.
Yes.
Our rights to privacy.
Yep.
How many of y'all have your cell phones? Let me ask you, please leave your cell phones on. I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we say. We need to defend the 10th Amendment.
Yes.
Yes.
That's right.
Or as President Obama calls it, the what? Fundamental protection that says the powers not given the powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people.
Yep.
That means their core areas the federal government has no business sticking its nose.
Yep.
And chief among those is education.
Yep.
Yep.
And we need to repeal every word of Common Core.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Education is too important for it to be governed by unelected bureaucrats in Washington. It needs to be at the state level, or even better, at the local level, where
Yes.
parents have direct control
Yes.
over what's being taught to our kids.
That's right. That's right.
And the third key to reigniting the promise of America is we need to restore America's leadership. We have seen the consequences of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy. Leading from behind is a manifest disaster. Today, our friends and allies no longer trust us. And our enemies no longer fear us. Tell you, when you travel abroad, when you meet with heads of state or foreign ministers or defense ministers of our allies, one after the other, they'll pull you aside into the hallway. And in hushed tones, they say the same thing over and over again. Where is America? What has happened? We can't do this without you. 6 years ago, imagine your reaction if I would have suggested that the Prime Minister of Israel would have been invited to address a joint session of Congress, and he would be boycotted by the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, and every member of the Cabinet.
Shameful.
It's a shame.
To be honest, if I'd have said that, I would have been dismissed as some fringe wacko.
What do you are?
Oh, no one would ever say such a thing. But that's how far we've gone. Instead of a president who boycotts Prime Minister Netanyahu, imagine America standing unapologetically with the nation of Israel.
Yes.
Yep.
In my time in the Senate, I have endeavored over and over again to stand and fight for Israel and to strengthen our friendship and alliance with that critical friend. Imagine a president who stands up and says, we are going to defeat radical Islamic terrorism.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And we are going to call it by its name.
Yes.
This Orwellian doublespeak from this administration is incoherent. When a radical Islamist in Paris commits a massacre, the President of the United States calls it a, quote, random act of violence. There's nothing random about an Islamist with a butcher knife going into a kosher deli to murder Jews because of their Jewish faith. It is a naked and undisguised act of anti-Semitism and religious hatred and bigotry, and we need to call it out for what it is. When ISIS beheads 22 Coptic Christians, the White House puts out a statement saying they were murdered because of their Egyptian citizenship.
That's just a lie.
That is not why they were murdered. Pope Francis powerfully observed, their blood confesses Jesus Christ. In Kenya on Good Friday, 147 Christians were murdered by Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab crossed over, and just to make it abundantly clear to this administration, they sorted the people. They asked, what is your faith? If you were Muslim, you were spared. If you were Christian, they shot you in the back of the head and executed you. 147 times. You go and look at the White House statement on the Kenyan massacre. You will search in vain for the word Christian or the word Islam. And it matters. When you don't confront what you're fighting, you cannot defeat it.
That's right.
And the single greatest national security threat facing America today is the threat of a nuclear Iran.
Yes.
There is no higher priority than stopping this catastrophic Iranian nuclear. A couple of weeks ago, I observed that if this deal goes through, the Obama administration will become the world's leading financier of radical Islamic terrorism. Now, in response, President Obama got very upset. I do so.
He does that a lot.
He interrupted his busy travels abroad in between the 8th and 9th holes to attack me directly. And he said it's ridiculous for Cruz to say such a thing. That rhetoric is too much. It's extreme. Do not say that.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
wasn't just President Obama. Republicans likewise. Mitt Romney tweeted to the world, "Cruz has gone too far. This rhetoric is too much. Do not say such things." Jeb Bush likewise said, now, take it easy. Don't use that kind of language. Let me give
Tell the
y'all a
truth.
very, very simple principle. Truth is not rhetoric.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, in the entire course of the attack, President Obama never bothered to even try to refute the substance of what I said.
You
So let's
cannot.
review the facts. Let's review simple facts. Number one, Iran is today the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism.
True.
Fact number two, if this deal goes through, over $100 billion will flow directly to Iran. Fact number three, if that happens, billions of those dollars will go directly to Hamas, to Hezbollah, to the Houthis, to radical Islamic terrorists throughout the globe. And those jihadists will use our billions to murder Americans, to murder Israelis, to murder Europeans.
And other Muslims.
And other Muslims. If President Obama doesn't like the rhetoric of his administration becoming the leading financier of radical Islamic terrorism, there is an easy solution. Stop financing
Yes.
radical Islamic
Yes.
terrorism. Now, some of y'all may be thinking, all of this makes sense to me. This is common sense. Live within your means. Don't bankrupt your kids and grandkids. Follow the Constitution. And yet, can it happen? Can we do it?
Yes, yes,
If you remembered nothing that I said today, well, then you probably had too much to drink. But if you remember just one thing that I said tonight, let it be this: that I am profoundly, powerfully, deeply optimistic. All across this country, the American people are waking up. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us there's nothing new under the sun. I think where we are today is very, very much like the late 1970s. I think the parallels between Barack Obama and Jimmy Carter are uncanny. Same failed domestic policy. Same misery, stagnation, and malaise. Same feckless and naive foreign policy. In fact, the exact same countries, Russia and Iran, openly laughing at and mocking the President of the United States. Now, why does that analogy give me so much hope and optimism? Because we know how the story ended.
Yes.
We
The
got
late
Reagan.
70s, in 1980, there was a grassroots movement that swept this country that became the Reagan Revolution.
yes.
Yes.
And it didn't come from Washington. Washington despised Ronald Reagan. It came from the American people. By the way, if you see a candidate who Washington embraces, run. But it came from the American people, and it swept in like a tidal wave.
Yes.
We went from economic stagnation to booming economic growth, to millions being lifted from poverty into prosperity and the American dream. We went from our hostages languishing in Iran to winning the Cold War and to tearing the Berlin Wall to the ground.
Yes.
The reason reason I'm optimistic is simple. The same thing is happening all over this country. When we announced our campaign in March, the New York Times promptly opined, Cruz cannot win because the Washington elites despise him.
Got my vote.
I kind of thought that was the whole point of it. Look, if you think things are going great in Washington, if you think we need to continue going the same direction, just kind of fiddle around the edges, then I ain't your guy. If you think Washington is fundamentally corrupt, if you think there's a bipartisan corruption of career politicians in both parties who get in bed with lobbyists and special interests, and that we need to bring power back out of Washington to we the people, that is this campaign. So the Times went on. They said, well, okay, maybe the grassroots will be with Cruz. But he ain't going to have any money. Because those Washington elites control all the money. And all the lobbyists are going to be with other candidates who aren't going to rock the boat, who are going to keep the gravy train flowing. Well, a couple of weeks ago, all the campaigns filed their fundraising reports. Out of 17 Republican candidates, do you know which campaign raised the most hard money? We did.
Nice.
In just over 3 months, we raised $14.3 million. In second place was Jeb Bush at $11.4 million. Now listen. If I had said 6 months ago that we were going to outraise every Republican in the field, including outraising Jeb Bush by $3 million, Saul, you would have said I was barking the moon nuts.
That would have been a nice way to say it.
So how did we do that? That came from over 175,000 contributions in all 50 states and all 5 territories. People all over the country going to tedcruz.org. 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 It's tedcruz.org. The average contribution was $68. That is the power of the grassroots.
Amen.
Now, I have to say, the last 2 weeks since the Republican debate, the energy and enthusiasm we have seen for this campaign has exploded. In the 100 hours that followed the debate, we raised $1.1 million. And let me say this finally. You know, for all of us here, freedom is not some abstract concept we read about in a book. It's real, it's personal. In our lives, in our families. You know, for me, I think about my dad, Rafael Cruz. My father was born in Cuba, and he grew up in Cuba. And as a kid, he fought in the Cuban Revolution. As a teenager, my father was imprisoned and tortured. He fled Cuba in 1957 and came to America. He was 18, and he couldn't speak English. He had $100 sewn into his underwear. His first job was washing dishes. He made 50 cents an hour. He worked full time. He paid his way through school. He and my mom went on to start a small business. Today, my father is a pastor. He travels the country preaching good news. Yeah. That explains a lot.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, my dad used to say to me over and over again, when we faced oppression in Rome, I had a place to flee to. If we lose our freedom here, where do we go? Nowhere.
Nowhere.
That is why every one of us is here.
It's time to fight.
This is a room of patriots who are not prepared to go quietly into the night.
That's right. Absolutely.
Who are not willing to give up on our children and grandchildren.
That's right.
Who are not willing to surrender freedom or one word of the Constitution.
Amen.
That's right.
That's right.
That's why we're here, and I just want to say to each of you, thank you.
Thank you.